بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Okay, just a quick recap of what we discussed in last week's lesson. So basically in last week's lesson I was mentioning those types of wealth where zakat is obligatory, such as gold and silver. And then we went on to mention those types of wealth where zakat is not obligatory, such as haram wealth, such as metals or precious stones, diamonds and emeralds, and we looked at platinum and so on. So those types of metals or those types of precious stones, there is no zakat upon them. Now moving along to today's or this week's lesson, the first topic which we're going to touch on is with regards to niyat and intention of zakat. Now zakat is ibadat and is worship. The same way namaz is worship, the same way fasting is worship. Similarly, zakat is also worship and ibadat as well. And as with all worships and ibadats, intention is a must. Intention is necessary. Without intention, your namaz is not accepted. Without intention, your fasting isn't accepted. Without intention, hajj is not accepted as well. So similarly, when it comes to zakat, it is first to make a intention, to make a niyyah that this money which you are giving to a poor person, you're giving zakat. Because if you don't make any intention, then the money which you have given to that poor person would be considered as sadaqah, nafli charity. So exactly similar as well when it comes to the zakat, you have to make sure that you make a intention. Intention is fard. If you don't make an intention, then obviously your zakat would not be done, would not be fulfilled. The second point then goes on to explain that it is not necessary to reveal to the needy person to whom zakat is given that the cash or coin which is being given to him is zakah. Okay, so rule number 2 is telling us that it is not necessary. Okay, so it's not necessary, it's not imperative that the money which you are giving to the poor person or whatever you're giving to the poor person, you don't have to actually say to him that this is zakat. Now this is quite important because sometimes we have some relatives, we're going to look at it later, that you can give zakat to uncles, you can give zakat to aunties, even to brothers, as long as they are poor. Now, sometimes what could happen is that you go to your uncle or auntie, you know they're poor, but if you were to tell them that, uncle, here's £100 zakat, they're going to get offended. Or, there may be some people who are really, really poor, or they're in debt, and they are actually liable for zakat. But if you were to go to them and say, oh brother, this is zakat, they're going to feel offended. They say, oh, you think us to be tramps or something like that, why are you giving us zakat and stuff? So in that situation, what you can actually do, you can go to them and say that, here, this is £100. I'm giving you £100 gift. And in your heart, if you have the intention of zakat, then your zakat would be done. Because as I explained above, that the main thing is intention. And if you cast your mind back to Salah, I mentioned that intention is something which originates from the heart. You don't have to actually say verbally that, I'm praying namaz, or you don't have to actually say verbally that this is zakat money. If you have the intention in your heart that this is zakat, so when you come to give it to this person, you don't even actually say it on his face that I'm giving you zakat. You could say some words, or this is a gift, or this is sadaqah, or this is like, here, this is like a debt or a loan. You could give it back to me whenever. And you make the intention of zakat, then your zakat would be done. Okay? But keep in mind that it's like when you are giving the money to the poor person, when it's being transferred, at that particular time there has to be intention of zakat. Okay? Intention of zakat. Okay? So when the money is being handed over, or whatever you're giving to the poor person, at that particular time, you have to make the intention of zakat. If, say, for example, you gave some money to a poor person and he said to you, oh, I'll pay you back. So you gave it to him with the intention of a loan. And then he's not paying you back. And then what you can't do is you can't just now change the intention and say a year later and say, oh, the money which I gave a year ago to this person who was in debt, I make the intention of zakat. That's not going to be allowed. It's when you are giving this money to that person or to the person who was in debt, because we're going to look at it later, you can't give money to people who are in debt. So when you gave the money to that person who was in debt, you have to make the intention of zakat at that particular moment or at that particular time. If you gave with the intention of a loan, and he said he'll pay you back, but now 1 year has passed and he's not paying you back, then you think to yourself, oh, do you know what, the money I gave a year ago, I make the intention of zakat, your zakat's not going to be accepted. So when you are giving it to the person or to the recipient, you have to make the intention of zakat. Afterwards, after you've given it to him, you can't then change the intention. Okay, and then lastly, rule number 3 goes on to say that if somebody put aside some money for zakat with the intention that he will give it to the needy, and at the time of giving zakat he forgets to make the niyyah, or he forgets to redo the intention and the niyyah, the zakat will still be valid. Okay, so what I mean by that is, just say for example, a person say at the end of the zakatable year, as I said, generally speaking, we tend to take out our zakat in Ramadan. So just say in Ramadan, you counted all the money, and then you said, okay, £200 is zakat. So you got £200, and then just say you put it separate, or you put it inside one of those money bags, and you left it separate. Now, 2 weeks later, a poor person comes and he says, oh, I want zakat money. So what you did is that you got that money bag out, you took a £20 note, and you just gave it to him. You didn't make a new intention. So what this rule is telling us is your zakat will still be valid. Why? Because you know when you separated the £200 or whatever the amount was from the main wealth, you made the intention of zakat. By you separating it, you made the intention of zakat. So thereafterwards, when you now give it to the poor person, you don't have to now make a new intention, because the intention for zakat had already been made. Okay? You know, it happens like we calculate the zakat, we then put it separately. We don't actually give all the £200 in one go. We leave it separately. Or just say, for example, I don't know, after Ramadan, we're then planning to go to Bangladesh. So we say to ourselves, okay, you know what, we'll give the zakat money ourselves. Instead of sending the money to Bangladesh, we're going to go to Bangladesh ourselves, so we'll give it ourselves. So you then keep it separate. Then when you go to Bangladesh, any poor person you meet, you just give him £20 or however much takas, whatever, you just give it to that person. You don't make a new intention. That's okay. Your zakat will still be done. Why? Because you initially, when you separated the wealth, you made the intention of zakat. That is sufficient. Okay. Any questions regarding these 2 or 3 points which I mentioned?
Can I ask one question? I have a friend, Syrian friend, because of what is going on in Syria. He's not rich. He is a teacher. So I mentioned to him, I'll give you some money. He was happy. So I'm just trying to find a method to send the money. How about if I give Zakah money to him?
Yeah, that's okay. If he's poor, like in terms of he's finding it difficult to make ends meet, and not probably in the situation in Syria, most likely you won't have that much money or savings, then yeah, you could give him zakat.
Okay.
You don't have to actually say to him, if you think he may get offended, then you could just give the zakat, make the intention of zakat in your heart. You could just say to him, this is gift or something. That's okay.
Last time I gave my zakah was in Ramadan, so it hasn't been a year now. So can I give?
That's okay. I think we're going to touch on it later. It's coming up, giving zakat in advance.
Okay.
You can give zakat in advance. It's coming up later at that point, inshallah.
Does the same rule apply for sadaqah as well? The intention?
Yeah.
Can you change your intention after?
Yeah. As long as... sorry, what do you mean? When you're giving it to someone?
When you're giving it to someone. If you had a different intention first, could you then say sadaqah and not zakat?
Alright, like for example, you gave some money to someone as a loan.
And they were supposed to give it
but
back.
they're not giving back, and then now you're saying it's sadaqah.
Yeah. Could you say it's sadaqah? No.
It has to be at that particular time.
Right.
At that particular. I thought what you meant was that can you give it to someone and say it's sadaqah, but obviously, say it's a gift or a loan, but in your intention you make of sadaqah, that would be allowed, similar to zakat. But if you're already given it with the intention, no, I want it back, and now you make the intention of sadaqah, it's not going to be sadaqah, because it has to be at that particular time. Okay, now the next section which we're going to touch on is regarding to whom zakat can be given, i.e. basically the recipients of zakat. Now the recipients of zakat is not something which the jurist or the fuqaha have to derive, because the recipients of the zakat is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has mentioned in the Quran. So in Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that verse, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, all the way until the end. So what we're going to do, we're just going to touch on each of the recipients who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, and these people you can give zakat to. Okay, now the first recipient Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned is the word fuqara, fakir. Now what does fakir mean? Fakir is basically someone who is poor and possesses more than their basic needs, but it is less than the amount of nisab. Okay, so last week or a couple of weeks ago we touched on nisab. So nisab is around £366. Now technically speaking, a fakir person, like a fakir, is someone who's got money, who's even probably got a house, who's probably even got, I don't know, like a job, but basically whatever he earns, everything goes for the necessities in terms of bills, in terms of family, and whatever money he has saved, it's less than £366. So just an example, like, he's got a job, he's got a house, he's got everything, but his total savings at the end of the year, say, is only £300. So that person is actually, Islamically speaking, is a fakir. Okay, even though normally we take the meaning of fakir is someone who's like really poor, who's living on the streets, but actually Islamically speaking, that person is a fakir. So because he's a fakir, so therefore you could actually give him zakat. That person actually wants zakat. You could actually take zakat. Okay. Now, what I just explained to you, it's not that clear cut, because I don't want, like, obviously then people thinking, oh, I only have £300 savings, I'm actually worthy of zakat. I'm not sure whether I've touched on it later, but I'll just mention it now. The jurists of fuqaha have said that if somebody, say for example, he's only got £200 savings, £300 savings, but at the same time, he possesses things which are not, say for example, necessities, and he possesses things which is more than the amount of nisab. So that person you can't give zakat to. Does that make sense? So just an example, like somebody, he's, fair enough, he's finding, ends difficult to meet, he's doing 2-3 jobs here and there. But then, mashallah, when you go to his house, he's got a nice, 48-inch plasma screen TV and satellite and everything. Now, obviously, that is not a necessity. And I'm sure that, plasma is probably worth around £1,000 or something like that. So you can't give that person zakat. Even though he's only got like, £100 savings in his bank, you can't give him zakat. Why? Because he's got like a TV at home, which is worth more than nisab. Or he's got like, say, a laptop. If he just got a laptop for work purposes, then it's different. But is it just like laptop just for like browsing the internet and so on, and that laptop is worth more than £366, then you can't give him zakat. Or just say he's got 2-3 mobile phones worth more than £366, you can't give him zakat. All right, fair enough, cars they consider more as a necessity, so you won't, kind of pick him on the car if he's got a fancy car. But other kind of things which are not needed, such as television, such as laptops, such as mobile phones, and other kind of like things and useless and futile things, if it is worth more than £366, he's not worthy of receiving zakat. Okay, so even though what I've just told you, black and white, it seems very simple that somebody who doesn't have savings of £366, you could give him zakat. But obviously, if he's got like a nice watch, a fancy watch, or a fancy mobile phone which is worth more than £366, then you can't give that person zakat. Okay. Any questions regarding the first point, or I think it's kind of straightforward?
If you give zakat to someone in Bangladesh, say by a third party, someone you trust them to give the money, you've given in good faith, you've given them the money, and they happen not to pass the money on.
Technically, no, your zakat won't be done. Your zakat's not going to be done. We'll touch on it later about, like, say, Islamic reliefs and all these charitable organizations. They just like agents on your behalf. So unless they actually give it to the poor or the miskin, your zakat would not be done. So technically your zakat, obviously if you don't know about it, then fair enough, you don't know about it. But just say for example later on in life, or later on, say a few years later, you do find out that this third person who you gave your zakat money to, give it to such a person, but he didn't actually give it, he used it himself, then you will then have to re-give your zakat again. Okay, the second recipient Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned is miskin, masakin, yeah? So miskin, the definition of miskin is what we normally take the definition of a fakir, and that is someone who is extremely poor to the extent that he is forced to beg. Okay, so that's the technical word of the word miskin. Normally we say that someone who begs is a fakir. But actually, technically speaking, Islamically speaking, the word miskin is used to describe those people who are extremely poor. Okay, don't you have that or no?
I think that is. I think mine's missing.
Is it either? What do you have after fukar? Masakin, yeah.
Yeah, it's another page. It's the, oh, you guys haven't got it?
Yeah.
Oh no, I have.
Good. I've got it, yeah.
It's on the other side. Should we go?
There it is.
Yeah. It's come onto the page.
Okay. Okay, so the word masakin or miskin. Masakin is a plural, miskin. So basically someone who's like really, really poor, extremely poor, who's begging, then obviously you can give him zakat. Okay, number 3, al-amilin. Now, al-amilin literally means someone who is a worker. Al-amil literally means a worker. But in this context, or in the context of the Quranic verse, al-amilin are those people, al-amil, are those people who have been appointed by the Islamic State, the Islamic government, to go and collect zakat from people. Now, what would happen during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would send people to go to every area, to every tribe, and collect zakat from them. So obviously, if they had, say, camels or cows, goats, Rasulullah sallam would send people, sahabas, to go and collect zakat from them. And this obviously practice continued after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death, during the sahabas' time, tabi'in's time, where the Khalifa, what he would do is that he would send people to go and collect zakat from people. Now, what would happen is that the people who are going to collect zakat, they're doing a job, aren't they? That's what al-amil means. They're working, they're doing a job. Now, the same way, I think I may have touched on this before, like the same way an alim or a scholar, he's teaching and he's giving his time to teach, the 2 hours or 3 hours, however many hours he's working or teaching, and he gets money for that. But he's not actually getting money for the actual teaching itself, but he's getting money for the time he's giving. So similarly, these workers and these amilins who were going around collecting zakat, they were actually giving their time. So therefore, what would happen is that when the zakat amount, or when the zakatable goods would be assembled with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give some money from the zakat. So it's not like separate from the admin cost, no. It was from the actual zakat money, the zakat donations. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give to the sahabas and to the amils who went to collect the zakat. Why? Because they actually were doing a job. They were doing, they were actually donating, giving their time. So because of that reason, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give them money from the actual zakat funds. Okay, so that's what the word al-amili means. That those people who are on behalf of the Islamic government. Now this is the key word. They have to be on behalf of the Islamic State. If it say for example, charitable organizations like Islamic Relief or Ummah Welfare Trust, or there's so many now, Muslim Hands and Super Hands and this Hands and that Hands, whatever. But anyway, there's so many. So now they are not working on behalf of the Islamic government. They just like private, like a kind of charitable organization. Now when you give zakat to them, it's not permissible for them to basically use the zakat funds to pay for their staff, to pay for, for the admin cost they won't be allowed to use the zakat funds to pay for this stuff, right? Now, the problem is that many of them do this, okay, in particular Islamic Relief, besides Ummah Welfare Trust, because as you know, Ummah Welfare Trust, 100% their donations go to the people and the recipients, but the others, like Islamic Relief, they do that. So it's very important that, don't give your zakat. Obviously, you can give zakat to them, but the problem is that, let's say you're giving £20 zakat, they take, I think, 10% off for admin fee, or 20% goes for admin fee. So £2 or whatever is going to go from that zakat. What you gave for zakat is going to go to their pockets for their staff, for the electricity, for their offices and so on. Now what's going to happen is that you're supposed to be giving £20 zakat, but in fact you've only given £18 zakat. So in the day of judgment you'll be questioned by Allah, where did the £2 go? So it's very important that you abstain from giving zakat to those types of places. If you want to give zakat to them, just say there's no Ummah Welfare Trust around, and if you want to give zakat to them, then say to them that, okay, I want my zakat donations to be separate, and for your admin cost, however much you charge, say £2, whatever, I'll give you separately. Okay, so that's the way to go around it. But obviously, if you don't want to give anything extra for admin, then obviously best place would be to do it through Ummah Welfare Trust or any other organizations who do it 100%. The money goes to the recipients. Okay, so it's very important to just keep that in mind. So all these places, Islamic Relief, if you have given zakat to them, then I know it's probably be advisable that you just try to figure out or think that how much you gave to them, and just give extra to the poor now with the intention of zakat, so that there's no leftovers. Any questions regarding this question, or sorry, this third point here? No? Okay, good. Okay, number 4, al-gharimin. Now the fourth thing which Allah has mentioned in the Quran, wal-gharimin alayha. Gharimin are those people who have a debt and do not possess any other wealth for goods which they could repay that which they owe. So basically, in other words, gharimin are those people who are in debts. Yeah, those people who are in debt, and you can give them zakat. So just say someone's in debt and he's really under the water in terms of he can't pay this amount off. So what you could do is that you can give this person zakat. And so someone in debt, you can actually give him zakat. But again, as I already said with regards to faqir, that it's not that clear, it's not as black and white, because again, you get some people, they are actually very easy to make yourself bankrupt nowadays. But then at home, they got their Skies, they got their the plasma TVs, they've got the laptops and so on. Okay, so if someone is genuinely, he's in debt and he has no other means, no fancy or futile things at home, which you could have sold and paid off the debt, and he's genuinely in need and he's in debt, then in that situation you can give zakat to that person and your zakat would be done. Okay. Any questions regarding this point number 4? No? Okay, good. The next one afterwards is وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Now, فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ are those people who are in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we mean by being in the path of Allah, it means in terms of waging wars, who are in the battlefield. So you can give them zakat. Okay, now again, this is another word, like the word al-amilin, which is kind of misconstrued by people, because obviously, even these charitable organizations like Islamic Relief, they actually consider themselves to be al-amilin alayha. So what happens, they actually take zakat from their people's donations. Again, another word which is kind of misconstrued by people is this word fi sabilillah. Now, fi sabilillah and what is mentioned here and what is mentioned in the books of tafsir are basically those people who are sacrificing their lives in the path of Allah. So for those people, you can give them zakat, for their food, for their, for the arms and so on. They could receive zakat. Now, the way people misconstrue this particular verse is that the word fi sabilillah is kind of very broadly used. Anyone says we fi sabilillah, like students, we are fi sabilillah, Tabligh Jamaat, we are fi sabilillah, just like hoovering the masjid, we just like fi sabilillah. This kind of used a lot, or everything's fi sabilillah. So then what happens, even people doing da'wah, fi sabilillah, that's what, the Peace TV is acting like, that's what they say, we're doing fi sabilillah, we're giving da'wah. So that's why you probably know that he takes zakat money for his television company. So nowadays people, they just like for da'wah, anything with fi sabilillah, da'wah purposes, television companies, just like say for example, doing a magazine or leaflet, we need money for that, for the printing and stuff. That is also fi sabilillah. So what happens is that they take zakat money. Okay, so remember that is totally wrong. Okay, totally wrong, because remember, whenever it comes to the Quran, you need to look at, just because it says fi sabilillah, you can't just like look at that word and just give your own meaning. You have to look at the broader picture. You have to look at the interpretation of the Sahabas, of the pious predecessors. And none of the pious predecessors or Sahabas have given such a flexibility with the word fi sabilillah. They've always said that fi sabilillah here means those who are sacrificing their lives, you can give them zakat. So any other kind of like da'wah work, any other kind of work where, alright, fair enough, there is, people are knowing about Islam, or you're conveying the message of Islam, but it doesn't come under the ambit of this particular verse. So therefore you can't give these people zakat, you can't give these television companies zakat, to build masjid. Again, you're not allowed to use zakat money to build like madarises or Islamic universities with zakat money. You're not allowed to do that.
On television, they clearly say, give us zakat money. Where did they get this from?
Okay. What, on Peace TV?
I think in Bengali channel they also say.
What, for their television channel or for something else?
Mosque, building mosque, madrasa.
Oh, we'll come back to madrasa in a second. I think it's coming up later. Madrasa is coming up later. But they don't use it for the building of the madrasa. They use it for the poor students. Yeah, when they say, like, for example, we're opening madrasa and we take zakat money, they don't actually mean zakat in terms of they're going to use it for the building of the madrasa. They actually use it for the poor students who are there.
If they say for the mosque, it's wrong.
It's wrong, yeah.
Now this genuine group that you can give zakat to fi sabilillah, is that irrespective of them being like...
yeah, irrespective of whether they're rich or not. Yeah. Okay, and the next recipient Allah mentions is wabnus sabil, i.e. musafir and travelers. Okay, so travelers in the view of the Sharia. So we read before 48 miles or 54 English miles and so on. So those who are travelers and musafirs, you can give zakat to them. Now what could happen is that, just say for example, I'll give you a good example where this could arise is say in Hajj, where like for example you've gone for Hajj and just say you lost everything, you get some thieves. Well, you get thieves everywhere, but sometimes you get thieves in the Hajj as well. So what happened, they've taken your, the money bag, where you put your money and your passport. So just say for example, they've taken that. So you've got no money, you've got no passport, nothing at all. Now you're stuck. Now how are you going to go back home? You need to buy tickets and so on. So in that situation, these travelers, they can actually take zakat money. Okay, so they could actually ask people, look, give me zakat money. They would be allowed to take it and obviously buy a ticket and go back home. So what I'm trying to say is that, travelers, musafirs, okay, they can also receive zakat as well. Okay, any questions regarding the recipients? There's some others which we're going to touch on later, but regarding the 7 or the 8 which we have mentioned, any questions or no? Okay, good. Okay, now let's have a look at the next subsection, the method of distributing zakat. Okay, so how do you give zakat? Okay, method of distributing it. So the first rule is zakat is first at the rate of 2.5%. Okay, 2.5%. Everybody knows that. Number 2, zakat should be given as soon as possible after it becomes due. It is possible that death could occur and thus lead to failure in fulfilling one's obligations. Now this is very important. As soon as your zakatable year comes around, then give zakat straight away. Okay? Why? There were a couple of reasons. Number one is that in Islam it's always considered preferable to hasten when it comes to good deeds. It's in the Quran in fastabiqul khairat, which means that whenever there's a possibility or the opportunity, of doing a good deed, you should do it. Even like say in the masjid you see like a rubbish there, then don't think that, okay, somebody else will come and pick it up. I'll just do it myself. Why? You'll get the reward and the thawab. So in Islam, whenever there's the opportunity of doing a good deed to help a brother out or a sister out or anywhere, then you should always do it. Because remember, actually one of my teachers actually told me this as well, that just an example, like you had an opportunity to do something, then what could happen is that opportunity may not come again. Yeah, there's that thing, like for example, let's say you had the opportunity to help someone. Now, if you said, oh well, no, I can't do it, you can't help this person, then remember that opportunity may not come again. In terms of what could happen is that you may pass away, or you won't have the opportunity ever to help people, in terms of you then become busy, you then move away, something happens to you, and you can't do that. So remember, whatever there's opportunity to do a good deed, then you should always do it. So exactly as well, when it comes to like namaz, when it comes to like fasting, when it comes to zakat, anything, you should try to do it as soon as possible. Why? Because it's good to do things as soon as possible. And number two, as mentioned there, is because death could occur anytime. You could pass away and then that's it, you're gone. Now this then takes me on to one ruling which I want to mention, is delaying the zakat, or in particular delaying zakat to the month of Ramadan. Now what happens is that even though we actually, all of us give zakat in the month of Ramadan, but for some brothers, zakat could have been obligatory, say 2-3 months before. Because remember, zakatable year doesn't go from Ramadan to Ramadan. It's basically from the year, or from the month, you reach the threshold of nisab. So what could have happened is that, say in the month of Rajab, you reach the nisab threshold. So your zakatable year, it's not from Rajab to the next year's Ramadan. It's actually Rajab to next year's Rajab. So then what happens is, now what people do is that they say, oh no, we'll give the zakat in Ramadan, because it's a very famous Bengali thing we hear, like, or if you give zakat in Ramadan, you get 70 rewards and 70 times. There's no basis of that. There is for the namazis, there's hadith for namazis, but not for the zakat. Okay, they say, oh, if you give zakat, you get 70 times more reward of zakat and stuff. There's no basis of that. So what I'm trying to say is that try to give zakat as soon as possible. Yeah, don't delay all them till Ramadan, because obviously if you were to pass away in between, then obviously you'll be punished and questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so that's rule number 2. Number 3, zakat will only be valid if the recipient is made the owner of the amount. Now recipient meaning, as we looked at before, the poor, the miskin, or the person who's in debt. If he is made the owner of it, then your zakat will be done. Okay? Now what I mean by owner, or what I mean by ownership of it. Ownership meaning, like basically the person or the third person who you're telling to give zakat on your behalf, he actually gives it to the poor person in his hand. Okay, in his hand, without stipulating any conditions. Now what I mean by that, just for example, somebody, he's giving, say, Abdul Rahman zakat here, like just say £100, but he says to him, okay, this is £100 zakat, but the condition is that with this £100, I want you to go and, say for example, build something. Or I want you to, like, say for example, buy this, buy that, or buy this for your family. Or I'm giving zakat £100, but the condition is that I want you to use this money to buy some books and go to a mosque or go to a madrasa. Now if you place conditions in your zakat money, then your zakat's not going to be done. Because remember, when you're placing conditions, you're not actually making him the full owner of that. Yeah, you're just like, in a way, you're kind of like taking advantage of the situation. So you can't place conditions in the giving of the zakat. All right? I'll give you another example where you're not making the full owner, such as like, just say there's a poor person, he's done some job for you, he's done some work for you, and then you give him like £20. Now you saying zakat, but at the same time your intention is, or this is like wages as well. So that's not going to be allowed. So what I mean is that it has to be, whatever amount you're giving has to be proper, with the intention of giving it to him, making him the owner. What I mean making him the owner is that, look, you're giving him £100 or however much is zakat you're giving, and then he's entirely up to him whatever he wants to do. If he wants to take the £100 and spend it on a, I don't know, disco or like, gambling, whatever, then so be it. But you've made him the owner of that. Obviously, he's not going to do that, that poor person, but that's how he's supposed to be. You can't stipulate conditions that, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that with the money, you have to invest it, I want to like see what you've done with the money next year. No, you can't do that. You just have to make him the full owner, that he is allowed or he's able to do whatever he wants with the money. Okay? And also, when you give him zakat, it cannot be in lieu of any services. Like he's done a job for you, so you're giving him money. So you're kind of saying zakat, but also at the same time, it's a bit of like wages for him. So that's not going to be allowed. So it can't be in exchange for any services. It has to be like totally you're giving that money with the intention to please Allah. Okay? Any questions regarding rule number 3 or? No? Okay, and remember one point here is that it's not necessary that you have to give money for zakat. I think I touched on this before. You can give, say, for example, just say if they are poor people, they need a hospital. So what you could do is that, with your zakat money, you could buy medicine. And then that medicine, just say paracetamol, you could give it to the poor people who are ill or who are sick. So you don't actually have to buy, you don't actually have to give money for zakat. You could, as long as whatever you've bought, as long as it's going to the poor people, then your zakat will be done. Like sometimes what people do with the zakat money when you give it to these kind of organizations is that they'll buy, say, sewing machines, and they'll give it to the widows or the poor women, and then they use the sewing machine, and then they make clothes, they bend clothing, and then they use that as a kind of income as well. So that's allowed. Or just say, for example, like there's poor students in, say, a madrasa in Bangladesh, Pakistan. So what you do with your zakat money, you buy books for them, right? And then you give them the books, and then they use it. So that's allowed. So what I'm trying to say is that as long as you're giving to the poor, okay, so you're buying books and then you're giving to the poor, then that is allowed. Okay. Obviously, we say it's best to give money because obviously then they could do whatever they want with the money, but you don't have to actually give money for zakat. You could buy books, you could buy clothing, food even. Just example, like if there's 2-3 poor people, so I don't know, you take them to a mishti dish or something, say like here, there's a buffet or something, and then you feed them £10, whatever, then that's it. Your zakat will be done as well. So it doesn't have to be. But then obviously you can't then eat from there as well.
Stipulating what you spend the money on them. If you're buying it for them, like you said, you can't.
No, that's not stipulating. No, what I meant was that, like, for example, with the food. So, like, for example, you take them and say you buy the food and then you give it to them, that's okay. But you're not stipulating anything there.
Yeah. And I have the same question, Sheikh. If I give my zakat to someone, the person may misuse it. But if I buy food, a bag of rice, bag of flour, and give it to the person with the intention of giving zakat money, would it be acceptable?
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Not
that's
putting any condition.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Or invest some money for them, or open a business for them and give them the business.
Now, I don't think so. Opening a business would be allowed, or doing a business, for them. I don't think that's going to be allowed. But what you could do is that you could buy a house for them. It is mentioned that you could actually buy a house for them with zakat. Just say if you're like a billionaire and you have to do like £100,000 zakat, and you could buy a house £100,000 and letting the poor people live, then that would be allowed. Yeah, that's something allowed. Okay, let's move on to rule number 4. Zakat cannot be given or used for the construction of a masjid, madrasa, hospital, so on, well, bridge, or any other public amenity. Okay, so any kind of public services like roads and stuff, you can't use zakat for them. Okay. Now, let me ask you this question: Why? Why do you think we can't give zakat to the masjid or just to a madrasa, or for the?
I think rich people would be using it.
That's not the. Does that no? Okay. We mentioned above that when it comes to zakat, you have to make the person the owner of it. Yeah, the recipient have to be the owner. So obviously, buildings, roads, bridges, they don't have any ownership. Yeah, because obviously they're not, beings. They're not humans. Yeah, so therefore you can't give zakat to these places, masjids, madrasas, and so on. Now going back to, I think, one of the questions which one of the brothers raised about madrasas, like obviously you hear all these appeals that madrasa, or we are a madrasa, we take zakat. So how does that work? Because obviously it's quite clearly mentioned that you can't give zakat to a masjid, you can't give zakat to a madrasa. So how does it work when they say, oh, we're a madrasa, we're opening a madrasa, we take zakat? Now, yeah, so as I was explaining to the brother, that when it comes to a madrasa asking for zakat money, they don't actually taking zakat money for the making of the madrasa or for the building of the madrasa, but they're actually using it for the poor students who are there. Okay. Now the way it works is, just say for example, there's a madrasa. Okay, so there's a madrasa, and in this madrasa there are many students, like poor students, say in Bangladesh, Pakistan, many poor students who are there. Now what happens is that, you know, in the Chanda book, you know, the book when they come and they say that, okay, how much sadaqah, how much lillah, how much zakat you're giving. So now what happens is that they'll have a separate fund for zakat. They'll have separate fund for sadaqah or lillah. So you know the lillah and the sadaqah, they normally use that for building work of the madrasa. They normally use that for the carpets, for the food of the other kids and stuff. They use that from the lillah money. Now then they'll have a separate fund or a pot for zakat. So what happens is that, you know, all the zakat money they get, it will go to, say, the principal or whoever is the head of the madrasa. And what he will do is that he will call all the poor students. They kind of like do a bit craftiness. They do a bit crafty here. Okay. So what happens? They call all the poor students, and what happens is that they give the zakat money to the poor students. Okay. So just say like £1,000, they'll give it. Okay, here, this is yours. Now, obviously, that poor student, he's obviously in a way he's kind of like a bit forced to obviously, or like obliged to give it back. Obviously, he can't like just do a runner, like, you know, go, I'm going with the £1,000. He's kind of obviously a bit kind of, how should I say? Yeah,
reluctant. He has to give it back.
Yeah, he's reluctant. Obviously, like he wants to give it back also because he's in the madrasa and stuff. So what will he do is that £1,000 which the principal gave to the poor student will then give it back. Now, as soon as this poor student gives it back to the principal or the madrasa, then that £1,000 they would be allowed to use it for whatever they want for the madrasa, like building, for carpets, everything.
So it becomes sadaqah?
Yeah, it becomes sadaqah. And it's based on, I think I may have explained it, it's change of ownership. I think I explained it with regards to lottery funding, changing of ownership, yeah? So basically, there's a very famous hadith that, as you know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wasn't allowed to take sadaqah, he wasn't allowed to take zakat money. So whenever, so there's a very famous hadith that zakat money once went to Barira. Barira was the freed slave of Hazrat Aisha anha. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went home once and he asked Barira that, you know, what are you cooking? So she said, oh, it's meat, but it's zakat money and you can't take this. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied by saying that it is zakat for you, but it is a gift for me. Meaning that when the zakat was given to you, right, so you now receive the zakat and you're now the owner of that. But now when you give it to me, it's going to be a gift. So therefore, I could take it. Does that make sense? If it was directly from that person to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah couldn't take it. Why? Because for the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's haram for them to take zakat. But if it's like from a third party, then it becomes halal. Does that make sense? So exactly here as well, with regards to the madrasa and the post, obviously the principal, when he gave it to the poor student, it was zakat. But now when the student now gave it back to the principal or to the madrasa, it was like sadaqah, like gift, charity. So therefore, because of that reason, the muhtamim, he's allowed to now use the funds for whatever he wants for the madrasa, building, carpets, you know, food, everything, lighting, everything would be allowed. Yeah? So that's how it works. Okay, the next couple of rulings very quickly. Poor students can be given, as I was explaining, a bursary from zakat if the student is of an understanding age. The zakat must be given to him personally, and if he is not of an understanding age, then his parents or legal guardian must be given possession of the amount. Okay, so poor students, so somebody who's a student and he's poor, you can actually give him zakat money. Okay, you can actually give him zakat money. I think the word bursary shouldn't be there because bursary is like more like a fees and stuff. You shouldn't give it with the intention of fees because remember, it's up to him entirely what he wants to do with it. If that poor student wants to use it for his fees, then so be it. If he doesn't want to use it for his fees, he wants to use it for somebody else, something else, then he's allowed to do it. But as you can see that you can give zakat money to a poor student. And then rule number 6 explains that authority can be delegated to another person or organization for the distribution of zakat in order that it will be utilized in accordance with the laws of zakat. Which in other words means that you don't have to give zakat yourself. You can actually tell someone, like give it to a third person or a charitable organization to give zakat on your behalf.
So who does the ownership lie with if they don't?
Yeah. Yes, as I was explaining to the brother there, like when you give it to, say, Islamic Relief or Ummah Welfare Trust, your zakat's not done. It'll only be done when they go and give it to the recipients. Yeah, so this is very important. If they got it saved in their account somewhere and they haven't actually released the funds to the poor, then technically your zakat isn't done yet. It'll be done when it actually goes to the actual recipients. Okay, that's why it's always good to actually give zakat yourself, and the best way to do it is like, if say for example you're either going to back home or Bangladesh, Pakistan, then when you see the poor people, or even when you're going for Hajj or Umrah and you see poor people there, then it's best that you give it to them on their hand so you know that your zakat's done. When you give it to organizations, alhamdulillah, many of them are very good. They do a lot of khidmah for the deen, but then you get some which are a bit dodgy and stuff in it, so you just have to be careful that you don't give them zakat, because what could happen is they'll probably use it for their own things and for their own benefit, and your zakat in that situation would not be done. Any questions? Or
if someone done a runner with the money from an organisation, do you have to pay it again?
Yeah, you'll have to pay again. Yeah. Have we? Is there another point afterwards? Or is there?
Yeah,
If the agent is given zakat. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's what explains number 7 then. Like if an agent is given zakat for distribution and he does not distribute it, then the zakat would not be regarded as fulfilled. Okay. So like I was saying, like you gave zakat to someone, but then he didn't do it, then your zakat's not going to be done. And the sin of not discharging the obligation will remain a burden on whom it was first. Basically, like the person or the individual who is supposed to have given the zakat, he didn't, so he's going to be responsible to pay it. And lastly, goes and say it is best to give one's zakat when it is due, rather than wait for Ramadan. Okay, so should give zakat straight away. Should not really wait for Ramadan, as I was already explaining before. Okay, actually, we'll just leave it there. I'll finish it off next week, inshallah.